Alright, so in today's episode, I'm going through 6 street photography mistakes to avoid making. So all of the mistakes I talk about in this episode, I've made myself on numerous occasions, and whenever I go out to shoot, I'm always making mistakes. So whenever you're out shooting or doing anything, you are going to make a mistake, so don't worry about that. But hopefully, the 6 tips I'm going to talk about in this episode will lead to you taking better photos the next time you go out to do street photography. Briefly, before getting into the list, you guys can help support this channel by hitting the thumbs up button and hitting subscribe as well. So first up, and this is something I see a lot, it's something I used to do myself all of the time, but it's to stop focusing primarily on finding interesting subjects and taking snapshots of them. Now, what do I mean by this? So previously, I'd just walk around the streets, find an interesting looking person and take a photo of them. I wasn't thinking about the composition, the scene, the background. It was all focused on finding interesting looking people and taking shots of them. And I used to think that made interesting looking photographs. But the problem with this was I was ending up with shots of interesting looking people, but my photography wasn't interesting. It wasn't creative, and in all, the photos just weren't that good. So instead, what you want to do is you want to really focus on finding good scenes, creating good compositions, and then waiting for the subject to walk into frame. Or even if you like moving and shooting like I do, like I'm always walking and I like to kind of walk around the scene or an area and continually shoot that way, and you do come across an interesting looking subject, in that case, find an interesting composition to frame the subject in, find some interesting colors and an interesting angle to capture it from, maybe a reflection to capture your subject from. Just get a bit more creative rather than taking just a basic snapshot of that subject. So just to wrap this first point up, when you're out there shooting and you see someone interesting, don't go up to them and just take a snapshot. Instead, find a good composition, find an interesting looking frame, some interesting colors, and then take the photo that way. But just kind of make it a bit different, be more creative with the photography, and don't just go out there and take basic snapshots of people, because that just makes for boring looking street photography. So this is a mistake I used to always make. I'd walk too fast, and when I did head out to do street photography, I'd pick a really large area to walk. The problem with this is, I'd cover a large area of London, but I wouldn't capture that many interesting looking photos. Whereas these days, I'll pick a small area, I head over there and I just walk around it slowly for the entire day. And this way, I get a bit more creative, I work the scenes more, I'm being a bit more careful and considered about what I'm shooting, and in turn, I'm taking more interesting, creative looking photographs. So in all, when you're out there doing street photography, don't be rushing about looking to cover as much distance as you can. Instead, pick an area, really work it, be creative in the area, find different kind of compositions, more creative scenes, find the creative subjects, and in turn, as I said earlier, you're going to get better photographs. So number 3 on the list is to be in the zone and don't listen to music when you're out doing street photography. Now, when I started street photography, I had always had the house with my earphones in, I was listening to some music, and I go about doing my street photography that way. Now, there's a number of reasons why you shouldn't. Firstly, safety. When you're out doing street photography, you probably want to be aware of what's going on around you. You never know when somebody wants to talk to you. Maybe you've taken a shot of someone and they're getting aggressive towards you, or there's something going on in the background, some madness, and you want to avoid it. So again, you want to be able to listen out to what's going on. When it comes to street photography, I like to be fully focused on what's going on. It's a bit like when you play sports. If you're practicing, then yeah, sure, pull a podcast in, listen to some music, whatever. But when you're actually competing, then you want to be fully focused on what you're doing. And if you have music in your ear or you have a podcast going on, you run a chance of being distracted. Again, for safety reasons, is there traffic coming? Is there some commotion in the background? Is there a fight going on? Is somebody being aggressive towards me? All of that kind of stuff. And for that reason, I do highly recommend that you don't listen to music and you don't listen to podcasts or anything like that when you're out there doing street photography. Okay, so next up is to not bring 3-4 different prime lenses with you when you go out to do street photography. This is a mistake I used to always make when I started out, and I got a bunch of prime lenses. I used to bring my 23, my 35 and my 50mm with me wherever I went. And all that ended up happening was I'd second guess myself when I'd go to take a shot. I'd think, does this shot work better with a 50mm or a 23mm or a 35mm? Rather than focusing on my surroundings, focusing on the scene, focusing on actually taking the shot. So this one's real easy to solve. If you can't settle on one focal length, then take a zoom lens with you, Or if you want to do what I do, when I head out these days, I just take one prime on the front of my camera and I go out like that. I don't take any other lenses with me. And when I'm out shooting, I'm fully focused on taking photos with the gear that's in my hand, rather than worrying about using different focal lengths or whether a different lens will do a better job at that time. Okay, so next up, keep an eye on those settings. Now, a couple years back, I went out to shoot. I thought I got some incredible looking shots. I was so excited to get back and edit them. I get back home, put them onto my laptop, and I realized that I took every single photo at 8000 ISO. So when I went to edit those photos, they fell apart real quick, and that day was pretty much a complete waste. So this one's real easy to solve. Before you head out to do street photography, have a look over your settings, make sure your ISO isn't something crazy, make sure some of your settings haven't changed by mistake. Things like your image size, make sure it's maximum, make sure that you're still shooting in RAW, all those kind of little things, because as I said, if your settings are wrong and you realize it too late, it can be a waste of a day. So before heading out, just have a quick look, and in the long run, that will save you some time. So last up, and this one took me years to work out, it's to just enjoy the process of photography and not to put too much pressure on yourself when you're out there shooting. Now realistically, if you get one good shot on a day out, then that's a successful day. And this is something I used to struggle with. When I used to head out, I used to be really frustrated and upset if I didn't come back with 3-4 really good shots that I could share on social media. The problem with this is you can never guarantee how your photo is going to be received by people looking at it, or how the algorithm is going to deal with it, or anything. All of that stuff is completely out of your hands. Instead, what you do have control over is how you go about doing your photography and enjoying it. Really enjoying that process of photography, because that's the most important part, that's the most creative part, and also it should be the most fun part as well. Also, what I found was, whenever I put more pressure on myself to take shots for social media or shots that would do well on the internet, I find myself being less creative and going for more cliche shots because I knew they'd do well on Instagram and on Twitter and stuff like that. And in the long run, what you'll find is you're being less creative. Therefore, you're pushing yourself less and you're improving less as a photographer. Whereas these days, I just focus on capturing things which look interesting to me. I don't really think too much about the end result. I'm more focusing on being creative, capturing things in interesting and creative ways, and just kind of having fun with it. And that just leads me back to the start of this point. When you're out there doing street photography, have fun with it. The more fun you have, the more creative you're going to be. Alright, so that's just about it for this episode. If you enjoyed it or you found any of these tips helpful, you can do this channel a massive favor by hitting that thumbs up button and subscribing as well. If you have any tips of your own to share, or you want to ask any questions about any of the tips I shared in this episode, drop them down in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to all of you. A huge thanks for watching and supporting this channel. Stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one.